Remember the scene in the finale of Breaking Bad when Walter White finally reveals to his wife Skyler the true motivation for his drug production? When he finally utters the words, "I did it for me," it's a collective sigh of relief now seeing our protagonist explicitly acknowledge what we've always suspected throughout the series, that Walter was motivated to obtain money for his family at first, but kept going because of his personal desire for power and control. But what if I told you he had already revealed this earlier in the final season? And what if I told you there was also a brief scene in the prequel series Better Call Saul where Jimmy McGill, aka Saul Goodman, explains his motivations for his crimes? Let's analyze and compare both scenes, looking at Walter and Jimmy's dialogue and their body language, which reveals not only Walter and Jimmy's self-imposed justification for their crimes, but also how their justifications differ from each other, further revealing why they worked so well together, but ultimately couldn't maintain their conspiracy. These are arguably two overlooked scenes in both series, and I think they're definitely worth exploring. If it's your first time here, my name is Quentin. I'm a writer, a teacher, and sometimes performer. It's time yet again to look at the compelling artistry of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. Let's get into it. Earlier in Season 5, Episode 6, Buyout, Jesse Pinkman straightforwardly asks Walter,
"Are we in the meth business? Or the money business?"
At first, Walter has no answer to this legitimate question. He's in a position where he can stop working in the drug business and still walk away with a substantial amount of money for him and his family, more than he ever imagined. In fact, if you rewatch the series, there are tons of opportunities for him to stop even as early as Season 1. But Walter only considered stopping a few times, and of course, he never considered it for very long. Now Jesse can't take any more of the violence, heartache, and death that has come along with this world, so he's ready to get out, along with Mike. Obviously, Jesse must be left wondering, why is Mr. White still doing this? How can he just keep going? Later in the episode, Walter addresses Jesse's question. In this scene, Jesse comes to talk to Walter in more detail about selling off all of their methylamine. Walter is seated comfortably and confidently in a chair as he sips on a glass of whiskey, a callback to him toasting to Gus Fring's murder in the first episode of Season 5. He doesn't say too much at first, allowing Jesse to do most of the talking. Contrast this with a scene from any of the previous seasons, and you can see Walter has a more confident energy. He looks relaxed, but not uptight in spite of his frustration with Jesse and Mike dropping out. He's listening, then responding, as opposed to trying to dominate the conversation. And his choice of drink being whiskey harkens back to masculine associations we make with alcohol. Walter clearly feels more confident and powerful based on his relaxed position, thinking then speaking, and sipping on a drink often associated with grandeur and masculinity. This body language and behavior communicates that he's in a position where he doesn't have to bypass or hide his true motivations. Jesse reminds him of the financial figure he had originally been aiming for, $737,000. Now Walter is scoffing at Jesse's notion that $5 million isn't nothing. To Walter, it most certainly is, and he explains why. We've gotten some subtle hints and explicit mentions of Walter's business venture with Gretchen and Elliot Schwartz, but for the first time, he offers more details. He tells Jesse how he sold his share of gray matter for $5,000, in stark contrast to the current worth of $2.16 billion as of last Friday. Walter checks it every week. He's probably been doing that for years and years and years. But it's not even about the money or his family's future needs. It's about Walter. He doesn't say, "I sold my family's financial potential for $5,000. He says,
"And I sold my share, my potential, for $5,000.
Following this up, Walter answers Jesse's earlier question.
Jesse, you asked me if I was in the meth business or the money business. Neither. I'm in the empire business.
Right here is a lengthier version of Walter saying to Skyler, "I did it for me." Walter has never forgotten his wasted potential, or how, in his mind, he was cut out of a multi-billion-dollar company. Therefore, Walter's justification for all of his crimes in this drug underworld goes beyond providing for his family. Rather, he justifies everything he's done because it's helped achieve a sense of power and control, by running the most profitable and dominant drug empire, at least now with Gus out of the picture. Walter justifies his crimes because it's all about him. Of course, by making it all about him, he neglects others, and that, as we know, is his downfall. Jesse ends the scene with a follow-up question.
The meth empire really something to be that proud of?
Then Skyler walks in, the last person Walter ends up revealing his true motivation to only episodes later. His wanting to have an empire that was all his own kept him in this business. In spite of all the consequences, he justifies it to himself because it's always been for himself, nobody else. Now let's talk about Jimmy, aka Saul's justification for his criminal activity, a justification that will lead him eventually into Walter White's drug business in Breaking Bad. Huell delivers a copy of Howard Hamlin's car key as another step forward in Jimmy and Kim's character assassination. Both characters are relaxed and casual, just sitting at the top of a parking garage, debriefing after a thrilling but risky con. Jimmy especially appears pretty content and relaxed, not in a power peacocking way like Walter, but in a satisfied way. Huell has paid his money, and instead of going about his day, he asks Jimmy,
Why do you do all this?
We can assume Huell hasn't been privy to the overarching goal of their plan to discredit Howard to settle the Sandpiper Crossing lawsuit sooner, based on his question and Jimmy's follow-up response. From Huell's perspective, he sees Jimmy, or rather Saul at this point, and his wife Kim Wexler as two successful lawyers who make great money, more money than a lot of other professions. Yet he sees them going to great lengths to scam people. For Huell, he's paid to participate in these scams, and the money is good for him. But he figures, why are these successful lawyers scamming? Why would they need the money? Why would anyone participate in criminal activity if it wasn't for money? After Huell's question, Jimmy is at first a bit surprised, and then chuckles slightly, telling him that,
I know from the outside this looks like just another scam, but you're not seeing the bigger picture.
A line which really reminds me of the scene in Season 3, Episode 1, Mabel.
Step back, man! Big picture this, okay? What damage was done?
As Chuck has insisted before,
He has a way of doing the worst things for reasons that sound almost noble.
Jimmy's philosophy is outcome-focused, or consequentialist, always thinking the ends justify the means. Jimmy has multiple reasons why he agreed to character assassinate Howard, but as far as Huell is concerned, the bigger picture is that they're making a
Real difference. Trust me.
For Jimmy, if he and Kim get their share of the common fund, she'll be able to open up a pro bono practice, Jimmy can continue expanding his business, and the elderly Sandpiper residents will get to enjoy their settlement money while they're still able to. The ends justify the means. Compared to Walter's use of personal pronouns when explaining his crimes, Jimmy talks about other people. With Jimmy's casual, laid-back body language and his insistence that this scam isn't about greed, but rather a nobler goal, it's apparent that despite his initial hesitation, Jimmy has found a justification for his crimes. This scam is for the benefit of others, but Huell doesn't completely buy it. Jimmy only half-heartedly answers his question. I think Huell suspects that there's more to this con than he's aware of. If it isn't about money, and if it is truly about the greater good for people, then maybe Huell can go along with it, or at least stop asking questions. Unlike Walter in his justification, Jimmy isn't fully transparent in the deeper personal reasons why they're going after Howard. The deeper personal reasons being keeping Kim's approval and reconnecting over their mutual love of scamming, as well as some complicated feelings towards Howard. However, Jimmy has a way to justify it beyond selfish reasons. In spite of the obvious damage to Howard and the potential legal consequences, Jimmy justifies it to Huell and himself as necessary for the benefit of others. An overarching justification that will follow and mutate as Jimmy continues as Saul Goodman. When we compare these two scenes, both serve similar purposes in each respective character arc. Both scenes take place at true points of no return for our protagonists. Instead of listening to or contemplating their co-conspirators' skepticism, they double down on their crimes. Jesse asking Walter why he so stubbornly wants to continue producing drugs, and Huell asking Saul why he so elaborately scams people if he and his wife don't need the money. Walter is presenting as powerful / domineering based on his relaxed but calculating body language and first choice of drink, whereas Jimmy is presenting as chill/non-threatening based on his relaxed and casual body language and quickness with his response. I think they're both relaxed in their demeanor because they both feel confident and justified in everything they're doing and have done. Walter's justification for continued drug production isn't about money as he had once had Jesse believe, but it's for himself and his hunger for power/control. Saul's justification for continual scamming also isn't about money as Huell would assume at first, but rather it's for the benefit of people that need it, which includes Saul himself and his relationship with Kim, but he doesn't tell Huell that part. By comparison, it makes sense Walter would tell the truth, whereas an early Saul Goodman wouldn't. Walter is nearing the end of his time in drug production, or at least in the midst of a changing of the guard, now that Jesse and Mike want out, whereas Saul is just getting started in his corrupt legal ways. Walter has reached a point of complete self-honesty, mostly, whereas Saul isn't at that point fully, though he does truly believe the Howard scam will benefit others, which offsets the immoral nature and potential consequences by Jimmy's moral standards. But as we know, that's only a tertiary reason. Still, it's clear that even in Breaking Bad, Saul is not as selfish as Walter, which I think is demonstrated most clearly by him trying to cut ties with Walter after helping him poison Brock to manipulate Jesse into helping murder Gus Fring. Saul, even in the Breaking Bad era, has limits to his criminal activity, so on some level, Saul/Jimmy does care about people, and thus uses his natural affinity and charisma with others to behave badly if it benefits his clients and makes him more successful. But with the Howard scam, Jimmy is mostly participating in it because of his marriage. So while they both have different justifications for their crimes, Walter being self-oriented and Jimmy being other-oriented, they ultimately both share a commonality in their justifications, despite the differences in their answers. It's not about the money. It's about what the money represents. For Walter, it's power and control. For Jimmy/Saul, it's acceptance and value. Both characters are self-interested to different degrees, and find ways of justifying crimes that ultimately serve them psychologically more than financially or morally. And thus, it makes perfect sense why they would conspire together. Walter will do what it takes to gain that power he lost out on years ago, and Saul will use morally flexible means to help those who need it, to prove that he is capable of being an acceptable lawyer, even for criminals. So they're a perfect match for each other. Walter needs legal aid as a drug boss, and Saul is willing to and can provide it. But Saul knows, on some level, when to quit while he's ahead. He's had more years of experience in this criminal underworld compared to Walter. He knows when to finally throw in the towel and run, even when Walter insists it's not over. Saul, or rather Jimmy, has seen a lot of the consequences that can befall other people when it comes to breaking the law out of your own self-justification, whereas I don't think Walter quite understands that, maybe until Hank's death. So while both can tell themselves what they're doing is justified, Saul has some limitations due to being more people-oriented, whereas Walter has very few limitations until it's already too late. Their ability to commit crimes and impose noble justifications, Walter providing for his family initially and Jimmy getting the elderly folks their money earlier, but ultimately self-interested justifications, is what connects them. But their different regard for other people, along with their different timelines, ultimately ends their partnership. Walter does what he does for himself, and Saul does what he does for his clients and to ultimately please others. In the end, Walter dies evading the legal and moral consequences of his crimes, whereas Jimmy gets caught and accepts his consequences, once again being other-oriented since he was motivated to surrender by Kim's confession. Their justifications go on to shape their fates. Walter dies clinging to power, Jimmy lives choosing to tell the full truth. In conclusion, I think these two scenes are extremely revealing and interesting to compare in regards to the similarities and differences between Walter White and Jimmy Saul Goodman McGill. But what do you think of them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. My Patreon is linked below if you want to support me in making these videos. Or hey, why not throw me a tip by clicking on the 3 dots below? Or become a member of the channel. You can earn some badges and get early access to videos like this one. Any amount you can afford helps a lot. Thank you. A special shout out to all of our channel members: Vermilion Star, Beatrice Paz, Coral Etkin, Adam S., and Niraj A. Thanks for the continued support. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. See you soon.